In today's video, I'll be talking about bearing. What is bearing? Bearing is an angle measured in the clockwise direction from the north direction. So if you have your cardinal point and you have your north here, your west, your east, and your south. When you measure an angle starting from the north and you move clockwise, then the angle you have measured is what bearing is about. And we have two types of bearing. Number one, we have what we call compass bearing, and number two, we have what we call three-figure bearing. Now, when it comes to compass bearing, the bearing, you start from the north or the south, and you move either to the east or to the west. So when it comes to compass bearing, you always start from either the north or the south, and you move to the east or to the west. So compass bearing can be in the form of northeast, for example, north 30 degrees east. It can be in the form of northwest. For example, you can have north 45 degrees west. And it can be in form of south east. So you can have south 78 degrees east. And it can be in form of southwest. So you can have south 5 degrees west. So when it comes to compass bearing, you start from the north or the south and you move either to the east or to the west. Bearing involves drawing diagrams. So if you want to represent, let's say, north 45 degrees west, diagrammatically, if you want to represent this, what you do is first you draw your cardinal point, you label appropriately north, west, east, and south. Then to do north 45 degrees west, you start from the north. Why are you starting from the north? Because the question says north 45 degrees west. North 45 degrees west means you start from the north and you move 45 degrees to the west. You can use your protractor to measure the angle. So this angle I'm shading right now is our north 45 degrees west. You have to use a protractor depending on the question you are talking about or the question you are working with. So this is not 45 degrees west. Another example is, what if you want to do south 60 degrees west? So you have south 60 degrees. Okay, let's make it east this time around. So if you have this, how do you go about it? So if you have this, you first of all do your cardinal point, you do north, west, east, and south. Then you start from the south because the question says south 60 degree east, meaning you start from the south, cover an angle of 60 degrees using your protractor, and this shaded angle you have here is your south 60 degrees east. So the second type of bearing is what we call three-figure bearing. In three-figure bearing, the bearing is given as a three-digit number. So you can have a bearing of 120 degrees. You can have a bearing of 317 degrees. And even if the figure given to you is not a three-digit number, you can make it three-digit, meaning if you have, let's say, 45 degrees, if you want to write it in three-figure bearing, you can write it as 045 degrees. So when it comes to three-figure bearing, the bearing is written as a three-digit number. Sometimes, some people even call three-figure bearing three-digit bearing. Now, how do you draw three-figure bearing? Now, if you are given a bearing of, let's say, 120 degrees, for example, how do you go about it? First, you draw your cardinal point, and you label north, west, east, and south. Then the next thing you are going to do is you start from the north. When it comes to three-figure bearing, you always start from the north. So you start from the north and you move clockwise. When it comes to three-figure bearing, you always start from the north and you move clockwise. So I'll start from the north and I'll move clockwise, covering an angle of 120 degrees. So from north to east is a quadrant, and a quadrant is 90 degrees. So I need an extra 30 degrees to make it 120 degrees. So I'm going to do a little of this, and I'll draw this line, and I have my 120 degrees. So the shaded angle is 120 degrees. And if you don't want to do it like this, you can always use a protractor, depending on the kind of question you are working with. All right. Another example, if you are asked to draw a bearing of, let's say, 330 degrees. 330 degrees. The first thing you do, if you want to do 330 degrees, is you draw your cardinal points. Let's say you have north here, you have west, you have east, and you have south. Then you move from the north in the clockwise direction. So this is 90, this is a quadrant, 90, then plus another 90, that's another quadrant, that makes it 180. Then another quadrant, that makes it 270. So you have 90 plus 90 plus 90 to give you 270. But remember, the question is 330 degrees. So we need an extra 60 more to make it 330 degrees, because 270 degrees plus 60 degrees will give you 330 degrees. So another 60 degrees and we have our 330 degrees. So the shaded angle, the one I'm shading right now, I'm shading it so that you can know the angle I'm talking about, is 330 degrees. You can actually convert from compass bearing to three-figure bearing. If we use the one on the screen as an example, let's say we want to change 330 degrees to compass bearing. The first thing you are going to do is this. Ask yourself, the angle, that's this line that you have here now, this line I'm showing you right now, what quadrant does it lie? Now, if you look at that line, the line is in the northwest quadrant. I'm going to start from the north, which is this place, and I am going to move towards the line. So I'm going to move towards the line. Remember, I'm changing it to compass bearing, so I'll move towards the line. And the angle I covered in moving from the north to the line is what my answer will be. So in this case, what will be the angle? Remember that a revolution or a complete turn is 360 degrees. So if the angle shaded in blue is 330 degrees, then this angle shaded in black will be 360 degrees minus 330 degrees, meaning you take away 330 degrees from 360 degrees. And what you are going to get will be 30 degrees. So how do you write your answer? The bearing 330 degrees, which is in three-figure bearing, will be equal to not the 30 degrees we got, and you write your west. Now, why is it northwest? Because this line, the line I talked about earlier, falls in the northwest quadrant. Now, this is just an example on how to change a three-figure bearing to a compass bearing. Let me take another example. So I'm just going to quickly erase this. Okay, another example. Let's say you have 120 degrees. and you want to change this value in three-figure bearing to compass bearing. Different people have different ways they go about this. I'm going to go with a method that involves drawing the diagram first before getting your answer. So I'm going to draw the diagram and label north, west, east, south. Then I will measure 120 degrees. Remember, you always start from the north in three-figure bearing and you move clockwise. So this is 90, and 90 plus a little angle like 30 degrees will make it 120 degrees. Note this straight line. All right, now that I have 120 degrees, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask myself, where or what quadrant does it fall? Meaning this line, what quadrant is the line? The line is in the southeast quadrant. So what I'm going to do next is, since the line is in the southeast quadrant, I'm going to start from the south. So I'll go to the south. Remember, in compass bearing, you start from the north or the south. So this line in question, this particular one, is in the southeast quadrant. So I'll start from the south. Then I'll move towards the line. Now, in moving towards the line, I'll calculate the angle covered in moving from the south towards the line. Okay, so what angle is it? Remember that the angle we talked about earlier, this one, is 120 degrees. And if I draw the angle, meaning if I start from the north and I draw the angle to the south, it will be 180 degrees. So what I'm going to do now is to find out what the black angle is. That's this one I'm shading right now. Find out what it is. So I'm going to do 180 degrees. Why 180? The reason why I'm doing 180 degrees is because if you start from the north and you go to the south, the angle you will cover is 180 degrees. So I'm going to do 180 degrees minus or take away 120 degrees. And if you do that, you are going to get 60 degrees. So how do you now write your answer? To write your answer, what you simply do is you write your south because the angle we are talking about is in the southeast. And since the angle we are talking about is in the southeast, what we are going to do now is we write our east. So I'm doing that for us now. Then the next thing is this 60 degrees, that this answer that we got, we'll put it in the middle. So we have 60 degrees. So 120 degrees is the same thing as south 60 degrees east. I hope you understand. Just the way it is possible for us to convert from three-figure bearing to compass bearing, it is also possible to convert from compass bearing to three-figure bearing. Let's take two examples on that. The first one is, if you are given a bearing of, let's say, north, okay, let me use a blue one now. I've been using blue, so let me also use blue. So north 35 degrees east. So you have north 35 degrees east. You want to change this compass bearing to three-figure bearing. What you will simply do is, number one, draw your diagram. You have north here, you have west, you have east, and you have south. The next thing is represent north 35 degrees east. So it means I'm going to start from the north and I'll measure an angle of 35 degrees. You can use a protractor for that. Okay, so this is not to scale. So this blue angle here, let's take it as our north 35 degrees east. Then the next thing you are going to do is to convert what we have to three-figure bearing. Now, if you are converting it to three-figure bearing, remember in three-figure bearing, you always start from the north. So I'm going to start from the north and I'm going to move clockwise because that is what three-figure bearing is all about. So you start from the north and you move clockwise and you stop on the line. So move clockwise and stop. The angle you get is your answer. So in this case, the angle is the same. In this particular example, it should not be like that all the time. So in this particular example, the angle I'm going to get will still be 35 degrees. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write it as a three-figure bearing. So I'm going to write 0, 3, 5 degrees. Now I put the 0 in front so that it should be a 3-digit number. And that example, if you want to change a compass bearing to a three-figure bearing, is what if you are given a compass bearing of, let's say, south 45 degrees west. So how do you represent this as a three-figure bearing? First, draw your diagram. So I'll draw the diagram: north, west, east, and south. Then the next thing is you are going to start from the south direction and you move towards the west, covering an angle of 45 degrees. You can use a protractor to measure the angle. Alright, so this angle I'm shading blue right now is my south 45 degrees west. Now, I want to change this to three-figure bearing. In three-figure bearing, like I have said several times, you start from the north and you move clockwise when you are doing three-figure bearing. So I'm going to start from the north and I'm going to move clockwise. Where will I stop? I will stop on this line. So you move. This is 90 plus another 90, that makes it 180, plus this angle you have, this existing angle. So it means you have 90 degrees, you have another 90 degrees, and you have 45 degrees. So you add everything. So you have 90 plus 90 plus 45. So what is 90 plus 90 plus 45? 90 plus 90 is 180. The 180 plus 45 will give you 225 degrees. So what you are going to do is you write your answer, 225 degrees. This time around, I'm not going to put 0 in front. The reason is because it's called three-figure bearing, not four-figure bearing. I hope you understand. Watch out for the second part of this video. And in the second part of the video, I'm going to be taking some examples on bearing, especially word problems when it comes to bearing.